In the 2.5 years since we've been fully functional, we've done 5,000 inspections.
The myths out there around batteries are extensive, and it's not a sexy topic, but social media, podcasts, consumers need the truth, and they need it in understandable, digestible format.
I've got my car key, my debit card in hand, my mobile phone, because I'm using that as a torch because the screen isn't bright enough. All of my attention is on the charge point in front of me and not on the unlocked vehicle behind me. And I just felt really vulnerable.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Women in the Driving Seat, the podcast that shines a spotlight on wonderful women in the automotive industry. This week, we're talking about electric cars, specifically the vital worlds of batteries and public charging, and the women who live and breathe this stuff. I'm joined by Antonia Stephenson from EV Battery Solutions and Kate Tyrrell from ChargeSafe. Hello, welcome both. Thanks for coming on. Before we get started, we'll have a look at your bios. Antonia is Director of Operations and Finance for EV Battery Solutions, part of Cox Automotive. Antonia has worked at Cox for 13 years, the first 10 as a finance director, before moving into operational roles. Antonia is 45 and lives in Leeds. With no kids or pets, Antonia is free to spend much of her time on the road, travelling for work and as much as possible for pleasure. Kate Tyrrell is CEO of ChargeSafe, a business born from her personal experience, which we'll come on to shortly. Before that, Kate worked as the event and partnerships manager for My Energy and is a self-confessed serial networker. Kate is a 35-year-old dog mum, married for 2 years to James, who she co-founded ChargeSafe with. Kate describes herself as a hopeless optimist and always has a stash of crystals in her bra. We are coming back to that because I have no idea what that means.
Sounds painful.
Let's start. Antonia, let's start with you then. What's been going on in your week? What plates have you been spinning? What balls have you been dropping?
It's been a really busy week for me. We are in the process of opening and getting ready our UK facility for EV Battery Solutions. And so we've had lots and lots going on with experts, clients, people visiting us, ready to get that up and running and off the ground.
And how's that affected your private life? Any time for anything else?
Not a lot. I spent the whole of last week in a hotel, away from home. So the weekend was largely taken up with life admin, laundry. I did do my usual, which is researching holidays and book my next holiday.
Yes.
So that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I haven't had anything booked since Christmas. And whenever I haven't got my next holiday booked, it always makes me feel really uneasy. And so now that it's booked, I can crack on with getting the work stuff done.
They say, don't they, when you come back from holiday, the first thing you should do is book the next one.
I never, ever don't have at least the next one booked before I go on it. So This is really unusual for me, and I just haven't had time, but it's now booked. It's all sorted.
Nice.
So,
You do that. I'm always on Rightmove looking at the cottage in the Highlands that I'm going to buy.
Oh, okay.
Everyone's on Rightmove looking at cottages.
I'm just looking at how much my neighbours' houses are selling for.
Yeah, that too. Kate, what about you? How's your week been?
My week's been a real mishmash of stuff. So last week I went to Gdańsk in Poland, which was actually really cool. I had no expectations going into it. We went for my husband's career. So he has largely supported ChargeSafe and now he wants to move into his own game development. So we went to a gamers conference, which was actually really insightful for me because it allows me to see how we can market software applications and stuff and gamify our own app. And then, what have I got? Accreditations coming up, some filming today, workshops. I'm having my hair done this week as well. So it really is like a serious mishmash.
You're changing colour with your hair, aren't you? Which is going to change your entire identity. No one's going to recognise you.
No one's going to recognise me. I'm kind of excited about that though.
And you said you're a dog mum. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah, Odin. Oh, he's my love.
What breed?
He's a Samoyed. So he is white and fluffy. He sheds. He's a serial shedder. I always wear black, and it's stupid, really, because I'm constantly covered in white fluff. Yeah, I should have invested in some sticky tape sort of business, I think, because I have spent a lot of money on sticky tape.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, okay, we've covered dogs. ChargeSafe.
Yes.
What is it?
So ChargeSafe is a 5-star rating system that reviews the safety and accessibility of a charging site. We then deliver that data via our application and soon, hopefully, other third-party mapping applications to give the driver a more informed choice about where they're going to charge their vehicle.
Okay, and when you say accessibility of the site, what does that mean?
So accessibility from the perspective of, for the disabled community, would they be able to fit a wheelchair astride their vehicle to reach all the components of a charge point? There was something that came in a couple of years ago called PAS 1899. It's a standard that was built by OZEV and Motability, the charity. We've used a lot of that to influence the way that we collect data of a charge point. So we'll look at the heights of components, the screen height, the bay width, all sorts of things that go into that. But on the safety side of things, we're looking more for security cameras, lighting, simplicity of initiating the charge. Do you have to play hide and seek with the charger in the car park, or is it instantly visible? Those sorts of things. Yeah.
And what platforms is it on?
So it's available as an app on Apple and Android phones at the moment, but we are in talks with one of the largest EV mapping applications next week, and I know that they're keen to get our scores on their app. I think we're going to do an exchange of data because we need the locations of every single charge point. But we've been going for 3 years now, so it's a big task.
Interesting, thank you. Antonia, EV battery solutions. What's that all about? Most people have not heard of EV battery solutions. I have. I've done some work with you guys, hence you're here today because I know a bit about it and what you do and think it's incredibly valuable. Tends to be at the kind of B2B or back end of the industry, not so consumer facing. Can you tell us about it?
Absolutely. So EV Battery Solutions is part of Cox Automotive, which is the world's largest automotive service provider. But we are very much a B2B business in Europe and therefore not really in the public's mindset when they're thinking about it. But our business has been in operation for over 11 years and our core purpose is...
But not 11 years in the UK.
No. 11 years in the US, about 7 years in continental Europe and less than 2025 in the UK. So really exciting times. And our core purpose and what we do is we perform battery diagnostics, repair, remanufacture services on the electric car batteries. And we complement that with the storage and logistics required to make sure that we're doing those services as quickly as possible. But it's a key part of that, creating that circular economy and ensuring the sustainability of batteries, making sure that rather than them all being used, if they break, they get recycled. We're making sure they can get back into the vehicles and extend that first life as much as possible.
Yeah, because that's crucial, isn't it? Look, delving into kind of sustainability content and things that I do, I think there can be a tendency amongst consumers and the industry to a degree to go straight to recycling. How recyclable is something? And that a lot of the conversations around batteries with consumers have been around that as well. And actually, what I've learned through you guys is about rowing back from that last resort of recycling the battery to, we don't want to get to that point until we have to. We want to look at totally in-life care.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Keeping those batteries in their first life and even in their second and third life before recycling is really important to ensure it's meeting the sustainability goals that everybody's set out. So yeah, recycling's great, and we're currently at about 95% of what's in a battery can be recovered through the recycling process,
which is unbelievable, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. But that needs to be the end point and the place where the parts that need recycling as part of the repair process go to. But we shouldn't just be assuming that things need to go straight to recycling. No. Normally when a battery identifies faults, it's just a few components that need replacing. So as a consumer, it's so much cheaper to repair than to replace, and it's so much more environmentally friendly, and it's not using the valuable resources needed to make new batteries. And so, yeah, repairability is and should be critical to this. And consumers aren't really aware of that, the repairability of batteries.
No, 100%. We'll come on to that in a minute. Just before we do as well, can you just explain to me, because I know it confused me at the beginning as well, difference between repair and reman, which is short for remanufacturing, isn't it?
Yeah. So repairing a battery is getting it back to the state it currently is. So essentially just fixing it and making it work again. Remanufacturing is slightly more involved, and that's improving the state of health of a battery. So taking a battery back up to the levels that maybe it was originally when it was new, or somewhere in between where it is and where it was when it was new. And so that's really extending the life, and often involves replacing more parts than simply a repair process, which is getting that battery back working and back on the road.
And are your clients OEMs or retailers or both?
Predominantly OEMs. So it's the vehicle and the battery manufacturers that we work most closely with, and we tend to work with them together because that way we can make sure that we're meeting the battery manufacturer standards as well as the vehicle manufacturer standards as part of the warranty process. And we do work with large fleets as well, but it tends to be the manufacturers.
Yeah. See, we're having this discussion kind of 10 minutes into the podcast, and, I'm always thinking, what's that horrific stat around podcasts? 30% of people drop out in the first 10 seconds or something. You think, my God, it's got to be ultra sexy. How are we going to keep this really cool? And batteries, let's face it, it's not an ultra sexy...
They are not a sexy topic.
...thing, is it?
But at the same time, that's an incredible service that we so desperately need in the UK.
Exactly.
Like you say, we jump so quickly into let's just recycle the battery, and that's always the thing that gets talked about. But I'm actually thrilled to know that this is a thing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is sexy for me, but I'm a nerd.
Well, hooray for you, Kate. But we do have to find a way. The weird thing is that although the general consumer or the general public finds this kind of topic and discussion ultra boring, it's also at the heart of all their concerns around going electric. Every single element you look at from electric cars, from a consumer point of view, the cost, the range, do they catch fire? The reliability issues, the warranty issues, servicing, after sales, carbon footprint, all comes back to the battery.
100% it does. And the myths out there around batteries are extensive. And it's not a sexy topic, but, social media, podcasts, consumers need the truth, and they need it in understandable, digestible formats, because consumers have an appetite to pretend to be experts about these things, and the shift from diesel, petrol vehicles to electric vehicles is big for a lot of people. And so they need to understand the facts, and we need to educate them. It's not a sexy topic, but, we need to make sure that people have got access to the right information. The battery it's changed the commercial dynamics of buying a vehicle. Yeah. It's 40% of the value of the vehicle, but it has also replaced a significant number of the parts that were previously in the vehicle. Yeah. And so, you can't compare the battery to the engine because you've also removed all these other things, which actually, when you think about the total cost of ownership of a vehicle, there's a lot less parts that can go wrong in an electric car compared to a petrol car. So, yes, you may pay more upfront for an electric car, and that gap is actually reducing. Yeah. But the cost of servicing actually is lower than with an petrol car. Yeah. So you've got to look at that whole thing. And the reason batteries have been so expensive is because manufacturers have been trying to alleviate some of the concerns that consumers have. So they've been investing in continual advancements of batteries in order to address range anxiety, charging speeds, size of vehicle to make them lighter. And all of those things mean that we haven't moved into the mass production stage, which is what you need to bring prices down generally. So battery prices are coming down, and they will come down as we get to that point where range and charge speeds are being addressed. And I think people need to start now looking at the stats in the industry rather than maybe the stats that were out 5 years ago, when the batteries were really new technology. They're still very new technology, but they were really new 5 years ago. If you think about your Nokia phone compared to your current technology, big change.
The pace of change has been exponential. I mean, I'm of the opinion that the government should be doing some sort of public information campaign that's 100%. Updated yearly, right? Because it will need to be to keep pace with the public charging network, the battery technology, the price differential, which, as you say, Antonia, is now down to 24% from 35% last year for new. All those things. I think it would, yes, they'd need to find some budget for it, but the savings that they would accrue by people making the switch because they felt more informed. Anyway, there we go. That's for another day. Kate, so, another area again where public charging network is acting as a real barrier to people buying electric, because they just think there aren't enough public chargers. I've got range anxiety, I've got charging anxiety, I've got anxiety left, right and centre, basically.
Yes,
I'm just not doing
anxious.
it.
Everybody's
I'm
anxious.
just not making the switch. But again, it's charging in all its guises and all the bits of jargon associated with it. We need to unlock and make more accessible. Why did you set up ChargeSafe? What was the gap you saw? What's it born to address?
So I had a horrendous experience at the end of, I want to say it was 2021. I was due to attend COP26. I was working for My Energy. I had my first EV. As a result, I was driving up and down the country because My Energy is all the way up north in Grimsby and I lived in Portsmouth. So I had to really quickly flash back from Grimsby to Portsmouth, spend a day with my loved ones before heading up to Scotland for 2 weeks to do COP. So it was really important that I had as much time with them as I possibly could. And I was driving along the motorway. They'd cut off a section, as they so often do late at night for roadworks. My mapping application wasn't aware of this, didn't redirect me, and suddenly it was, all the flashing lights, please go this way, diversion signs left, right and centre. So I found myself being diverted from my usual route, which was going to take up slightly more range, and I was feeling a bit anxious. So I thought, right, well, I'm nearby a town. I will pull over, see if there's anything that's 50 kilowatt plus so that I know I can get in, get out, put an extra 30, 40 miles range on my vehicle before I get home, because I had the luxury of an at-home charger at the time. So I knew that I would be able to charge as soon as I got home. And I could see that there were 3 chargers in the town, and I thought, this is fantastic. I've got the luxury of choice, which, back in 2021 wasn't a huge thing. Now it's much easier. But then they were sparse. So I pulled up to the first one. It was at the back of a very dark car park. I felt extremely vulnerable. I had to drive through a car park to get to the second car park, and there it was right at the back. There was a car full of teens nearby, and I'm not ashamed to say I am of a certain age now. That is a little bit terrifying. I've gotten out of the vehicle, attempted to initiate the charge, but it was a very old unit that required you to download an application, divulge your mother's maiden name and dog's date of birth in order to get in and set up your charge. And I thought, it's not worth it. I'd rather not sit here. I'll go on to the next one, which was in a supermarket car park. And I felt that would probably feel a bit safer, be well lit, I'd be visible. Oh no, this supermarket, super savvy in savings, switches off all of its lights when it gets to midnight. And the charge point itself was actually in the darkest corner of the car park underneath a tree, and had a very ominous looking alleyway beside it, which was just pitch black. I couldn't see at all. So already I'm feeling quite nervous. Pulled up, plugged in the charger, fails to communicate with the vehicle. So I've jumped back out and I'm staring. I realise that I'm staring at this tiny LED screen. I've got my car key, my debit card in hand, my mobile phone, because I'm using that as a torch because the screen isn't bright enough. All of my attention is on the charge point in front of me and not on the unlocked vehicle behind me. And I just felt really vulnerable, really open to potential attack. And I couldn't get the thing to work. So I called the customer services line, had a very frantic conversation with the poor woman who was trying to remotely restart it. And after about 5 minutes, close to sobbing, I said, I'm very sorry, I'm too scared, I have to go. Hung up, unplugged, got back in the car, gone to the third one. Petrol station was switched off because the petrol station was closed. I've never ever experienced that since or before that. And I came to realise, okay, I can't use this charge point. What's next? There's one 24 miles away. My range is 24 miles and it's on the M3. So I'm going to have to travel at 70 miles per hour. Anybody who's driven an EV will appreciate when you go at a slightly quicker speed, your range is going to deplete. So I took the decision to crawl along the hard shoulder with my hazards on. And I knew that was probably not legal. And for me, I was trembling, like physically trembling in my car, just hoping that I was going to make it to the charge point, worried I was going to get pulled by the police or somebody else could just pull up in front of me and spoil that
Did you
journey.
make it?
I did make it. The car went into turtle mode and had given up on telling me how much range I even had left. I only made it because my partner was on the phone to me looking at Google Maps and could tell me exactly where in that car park the charge was. So, got through that. I jumped onto Twitter because Serial Networker, I knew a fair amount of CEOs of the CPOs, and I was like calling them out, tagging them in, like, what are you going to do about this? This is completely disgusting. This cannot happen to other women. And they all came back to me and said, when a solution is available, we'll certainly implement it. And I thought, will you? No, you're not going to do that. I'm going to have to do something about this. James, as I mentioned, is a games developer. He's a very intelligent man. And he said, we could build something that's going to influence change here. And I was like, you're having a laugh, mate. There's no way I'm going to leave my job, my energy to start something without any money. Like, what are you saying? But we did. And we bootstrapped ChargeSafe from very early days. We figured out very quickly if you rate something and publish the result publicly, it encourages positive change, like your hygiene rating at a restaurant. You would only eat at a restaurant that was 3 or below if you're particularly brave and very strong-stomached, but you would typically go for a 4 or 5. So we were like, what are the measures of this? How do we make sure we stay independent and that we cannot be biased in any way? So we've had a lot of development and thought go into what can we measure using data that removes any emotion from this as a situation? How do we involve the public? How do we build a community? And how do we ensure that we can become a trusted and reliable source of data?
And here you are.
And here I am. Yeah.
Ta-da! Amazing. Wow, that's quite some story. Not many people who set up companies have that level of personal detail behind it. But, that speaks volumes about where we've been up to now as women driving electric cars. Wow. Okay, well, we're halfway through. We're going to have to pause that conversation for a second for podcast pit stop. The moment you've both been waiting for, I can tell by the looks on your faces. Sheer excitement. Antonia, we're going to come to you first. Quick round questions. Are you ready?
Yes. If I said no, would it stop?
No, I completely ignore you and carry on. Documentary or drama?
Ooh. That's really hard.
Quick fire round, Antonia. Quick
Documentary.
Fire round. Lithium or cobalt?
Lithium.
Weights or yoga?
Weights.
Scotland or Wales?
Wales.
Couscous or lentils?
Neither. Sorry. Rice.
Kilowatt or kilowatt hour?
Kilowatt hour.
One for the purists. Thank you very much. Kate, cinema or Netflix?
Netflix.
OEM or retailer?
OEM.
Pod point or grid serve?
Grid serve. That's so naughty.
I know. I always sneak that in the middle. Start work late or leave early?
Start work late.
City or country?
City.
Tesla or Polestar?
Polestar.
There you go. Wasn't too bad, was it?
No, that was good.
So, Antonia, coming back to EV battery solutions, all things battery focused. What do you think is going to happen with battery pricing? Are we going to kind of come exponentially down in price from now on, or is it a slow trickle down effect still, do you think?
I think a bit of both, depending on whose cars you're buying. We're seeing the Chinese entrants bring their prices down significantly. And I think that that will naturally cause competition. And as a consequence, we will see prices coming down, but there will always be some that are more expensive. So I think we're going to see the prices reduce, and we're already seeing it. And I think we'll see it continue to increase at pace. But I don't think it will drop significantly in a really short time frame. I think it'll take a bit of time for it to drop because there's still that continued investment in range and in new technologies, and the manufacturers have to recover those costs. So, there's a lot of focus at the moment on how do we continue to increase that range and making the batteries lighter in order to extend that. And so there's still lots of investment going on. So I think we'll see a reduction in price, certainly from the existing technologies, but we'll see that constant new thing coming to market, which is slightly more expensive as we go.
And talking of new things coming to market, what's next for battery technology? Where are we with solid state? Is solid state batteries, is that the next thing that we're waiting for?
Definitely not my area of expertise. I have some very, very technical people in the business who could...
You do, don't you? I've met some of them.
Yes,
proper
absolutely.
white coat men.
Yes, some engineers who know far too much about batteries and believe it is a sexy topic. But yeah, I think, next I think we're going to look, it'll be the cell to pack, where the batteries are, the modules are welded into or attached to the frames to reduce the weight. We're seeing that coming already, which makes repairability more difficult. Because you need laser cutting tools and things to repair those batteries. So I'd like to hope that wherever the technology goes, repairability is forefront of mind. Because
Got to be, hasn't it? I mean, it's madness.
You've got to think so, but then there are companies out there who've issued products for years with no ability to repair them. So you've got to think that you've got to hope that everyone will focus on that, but we'll have to wait and see where the industry goes.
Yeah. And just going back a second to in-life battery care, because we've talked about this in this podcast a bit, I suppose, without really explaining what that means if you're a consumer listening in and thinking, well, how are you going to take care of me then? Or how is the industry, how is the OEM, how is the retailer, and ultimately you who will be supporting those OEMs? What does in-life battery care consist of for a consumer? So, for example, if a consumer's got worried about the range, I suppose, would be one thing, wouldn't it? Or thinks their battery isn't performing as well as it should be.
Yeah, in-life battery care is everything whilst that battery is in your vehicle. So there's lots that consumers can do themselves. There's lots of information out there about how much you should charge your batteries up when
Is that a thing, by the way, about trying to keep it between 20% and 80%?
Yeah, it is a thing, yeah.
Really?
It's the same for mobile phones and all batteries.
I'm just thinking, because I regularly run mine into the red. Is that naughty? Because I was always in the red as an ICE driver.
Which isn't ideal from an ICE vehicle point of view either. So, yeah, it's not ideal. So, ideally, that 20 to 80... Well, I mean, it's just about keeping your battery life keeping your battery as long as possible is what we're aiming for. So there's lots that consumers can do, and there's lots of information that comes with your car, that comes with charge points about what you can do to improve it. So, heating the car up before you start driving it, that sort of thing.
Preconditioning, they do that quite a lot, don't they?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
helps as well, does it?
Yeah. And then from our point of view, they're electronic items. They are very safe, they are very reliable, and we don't see that many faults. But there are always going to be faults that arise on these things. It's no different to any other piece of equipment. And so the in-life battery care that we provide is very much that diagnostics and repair and improving the batteries and getting them back on the road. So in-life battery care is anything to do with keeping that battery in its first life for as long as possible, extending its life cycle, and also, therefore, reducing the cost to the consumer, to the manufacturer, and to the environment.
Okay, thank you. Kate, back to charging. How many, let's talk numbers around ChargeSafe. How many sites are reviewed and inspected? How big's the community? Do you rely on community reviewers? What's
Absolutely.
going on?
So in the 2.5 years since we've been fully functional, we've done 5,000 inspections. We have just shy of 200 community input providers. So that's just a general member of the public who's signed up using the ChargeSafe app. They can complete a smaller, it's like a 20-point inspection plan. There is room there for free text boxes, so they can put in their own emotions, their feelings, what they're experiencing at that site. What that does is flag to us what sites should be made a priority for an official inspection to occur. So then we would send an inspector to that site. If it's scored, anything below a 3.5, anything below a 2, it will get the priority for us or our accredited partners. So these are CPOs who have taken our workshop, understand the standards that we're working to.
CPO, by the way, stands for?
Charge Point Network Operator. Apologies. So if they've become an accredited partner, they're already working to our standards. If something comes up and it's like a 2 or less, then we'll be like, okay, something's terribly wrong
And
here.
could that be a 2 or less rating against accessibility or against safety? Or
both. So the overall rating is an average of safety and accessibility. Right. The charge point network operators have the ability to understand what their safety score is and what their accessibility score is. And as we bifurcate that data moving forwards, if the likes of Motability Operations, who were very heavily involved in our early days, came to us and said, we just want to know the accessibility ratings of all these sites, we're able to divide that out and give that to them. Right. So there's lots of applications that the data will enable us to use in future. At the moment, though, we just haven't covered enough ground for that to truly be valuable at this moment in time.
And the safety thing, you and I have had a couple of robust discussions about this, because I've always wondered, what's the best use of the comms that we're sending out to all women out there who think about going electric? Mm-hmm. Is it to kind of talk to them about how safe a charging point might be at midnight on is it well lit? Is it secluded and so on? Or actually, is it perception versus reality? And the reality is that very few women are going to be out on the road at midnight and looking for a charging point, or most women are going to actually be using destination chargers because range of their cars are then hardly going to be using the public charging network. But I think you feel, no, it's important to get this out there. Enough women that have had negative experiences, and it is a real worry for them, this kind of dark, secluded aspect of charging.
Yeah, so for me, I've always been very careful about the messaging that we're putting out there, because I definitely don't want to put women off of going electric as a result of my isolated experience that created ChargeSafe. So I haven't heard of too many experiences that left women feeling scared or put off having an EV. It's more about prevention is better than the cure, right? So how many EVs are on the road today, and how many of them are driven by women? And in 5 years' time, what does that growth look like? So if you look at me as a person, I have PTSD, anxiety and depression. I'm a mixed bag. I am naturally more anxious anyway, and I overthink and I worry about everything. So for me, going into a site, I am imagining all kinds of crazy outcomes. But that's 1 in 3 people, that have a mental health illness. And I can imagine that is me with my overthinking, that I'm not going to be the only one to feel like this. And I know from putting it out on Twitter back in the day when we were starting ChargeSafe, a lot of people approached me on the thread and in my DM saying, yeah, this actually is a concern for me. And it wasn't all women. So the messaging has heavily been, I am a woman, I'm terrified of charging my car when it's after dark. And let's not forget, November through to March, it is darker earlier. It's not just midnight. But for me, I can speak from my own personal experience and say, I'm a woman and this scares me. So many men have come up to me and said, yeah, you know what, I love what you're doing, because I have personally felt quite vulnerable in a dark place at night, or I'm scared for my daughter who's just got her driving license and I wouldn't want her to be in that position. Mm. And we never know when there's going to be an opportunity where you are having to look for a charger late at night, against your will, or you don't want to charge late at night. Nobody
yes, that's
does.
A good point, isn't it? Just because it's not necessarily going to form part of your week in, week out life doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And so,
exactly.
You're there for people.
It's knowledge is power, right? So if we can collect this data now and give it to the right people, so the mapping applications to be able to publish and distribute that in a meaningful way to members of the public, it's there and it's for users to make their own decision. But I'm not saying, oh, this place is terrible, never charge your car here because something horrible is going to happen. That's absolutely not the messaging for us.
Understood. We're nearly at the end. Time flies. Antonia, we're kind of into our tips and tricks section, which we always end with. And I think there's something there around batteries. You don't, from your point of view, for anyone out there listening who thinks, well, actually, it does sound like an interesting part of the industry to get into. Obviously, it's hugely growing. It's at the forefront of everything. You don't have to be a scientist, do you? There's plenty of jobs out there in EV battery solutions and companies like it.
Absolutely. We are recruiting heavily in all elements of our world. So, yes, we need the scientists, the engineers to do some of the work, but we also recruit from the bottom up, apprentices. We just make sure that everybody has received the full training to be able to work safely, because these are, at the end of the day, high voltage complex pieces of equipment. So, it's not like tinkering with your car on your drive. It can be a dangerous environment if you don't follow the right processes. So we make sure that the people we bring in receive all of the training to make sure that everything we do is safe and meets the quality expectations of our customers. And that's really important. But absolutely, you don't have to have degrees in engineering to work in batteries. There are so many jobs out there in this space. Disappointingly, we've been doing a lot of recruitment in the UK recently, and the proportion of female versus male applicants has been pretty poor. It's definitely an area where we'd like to see more females joining the team.
Good. Kate, a quick word from you, because I'm afraid we really have run out of time. Briefly, if you would, just for people wanting to be as brave as you and start up their own app, start off their own company of some description in the world of EVs, is it a case of just get up and do it?
Just get up and do it and be authentic. What we're finding is that there are a lot of people now coming into the industry with pound signs in their eyes, and you can easily point them out in the crowd. Like, you really need to love the industry, be collaborative as well. It's not a competitive environment just yet. Collaborate, go for it, trust your gut, and if you're a woman, behave as a man would, is the best advice I could give.
Which means what?
Which means you get up and you go and you do it. There was a question I wanted to ask Deborah Meaden at Fully Charged, and I had Laura Hardy from GridServe stand behind me, and she went, "You go get in that queue, because if you're a man, you'd already be there."
Yeah, I love
and
Laura.
I was like,
That's
the audacity, great. I'm doing it.
Audacity. Let's finish with that as our key buzzword for today. Thank you both so much. It's been great to have you on. Thanks everyone for listening. Tune in. Please follow on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.
Thanks.